The snow fell so thick that evening that Jorin Finch could barely see the barn from his kitchen window. And when he heard the knock at his door, he thought at first it was only the wind rattling the frame. He set down the tin cup of weak tea he had been nursing and crossed the small room, pulling his worn coat tighter against the draft that crept through every crack in the old homestead. When he opened the door, the wind drove snow into his face with such force that he had to shield his eyes. Through the white chaos, a figure stood on his porch, hunched against the storm, and his first instinct was to step back in alarm. She was an orc. There was no mistaking it, even through the curtain of snow. Her skin was a deep forest green that seemed to absorb what little light remained in the dying day. She wore a heavy cloak that had clearly once been of good quality, but was now tattered at the edges and soaked through with melting snow. In her arms, she clutched a copper kettle against her chest as though it were the most precious thing in the world. Her tusks, small but unmistakable, jutted from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were red with cold where they poked through the hood of her cloak. "Please," she said, and her voice cracked on the word. "I need shelter, just for the night. I will be gone before dawn." Jorin stood frozen in the doorway. Every instinct told him to close the door to protect himself. There were stories about orcs, about their violence, their savage nature. The war had ended only 3 years ago, but the hatred between their peoples ran deeper than any peace treaty could reach. He had lost his older brother to an orc blade on the northern front. But the woman before him was shaking so violently that he could hear her teeth chattering, and her eyes held nothing but desperate exhaustion. "I have nowhere else to go," she said, and there was such raw vulnerability in those words that Jorin found himself stepping aside before his rational mind could object. She stumbled across the threshold, bringing a gust of snow with her, and he quickly shut the door against the storm. The sudden quiet of the house felt oppressive after the howling wind. They stood there for a moment, looking at each other in the dim light of his single oil lamp. She was taller than him by at least 3 inches, with broad shoulders and a muscular build that spoke of hard labor or warrior training. Her hair, black as pitch and braided in intricate patterns, hung over one shoulder, dripping melted snow onto his floor. Despite her obvious strength, she swayed where she stood, exhausted beyond measure. "The fire," Jorin said, gesturing to the small hearth where he had been trying to conserve his dwindling wood supply. "Get warm." She moved toward it with halting steps, still clutching the kettle. As she sank down onto the rough stone of the hearth, Jorin noticed her feet were wrapped in cloth that had been white once, but was now stained with blood and mud. She had been walking for a long time. "Are you injured?" he asked, keeping his distance but unable to ignore basic human decency. "No," she said quietly, "just cold and tired." He nodded and moved to his small cupboard, pulling out the last of his dried bread and a precious bit of hard cheese. He set them on the table. "Eat something." She looked at the food, then at him, and something flickered in her amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, suspicion. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you asked," he said simply. "And because no one deserves to freeze to death in a storm like this." She set the kettle down carefully on the hearth, positioning it with a reverence that struck him as odd, and then moved to the table. She ate slowly, methodically, as though forcing herself to take small bites when she clearly wanted to devour everything in sight. Her hands, he noticed, were scarred and calloused. "I am Kara," she said finally, not meeting his eyes. "Jorin." They sat in silence while she finished eating. Outside, the wind howled and rattled the shutters. Jorin added another precious log to the fire, knowing he would regret it come morning but unable to watch her shiver any longer. The small warmth it provided seemed to revive her somewhat. "The kettle," Jorin said, unable to contain his curiosity. You were protecting it like it was gold. Kara's hand moved instinctively toward the copper vessel. It was my mother's. It is all I have left of my family. She paused, and he saw the muscles in her jaw work as though she were fighting with herself over whether to continue. And it contains my wedding vows. Jorin blinked. Your what? Written vows for my arranged marriage. Her voice had gone flat. I was traveling to meet my betrothed, a warrior from the northern clans. It was supposed to unite our tribes, prevent further bloodshed between us. She looked directly at him then, and there was something fierce and broken in her gaze. But I could not do it. I fled. The weight of what she was saying settled over the room. An orc who abandoned an arranged marriage, especially one meant to forge peace between clans, would be considered an oath breaker. She would be cast out, hunted even. So you are running, Jorin said. Yes. She wrapped her arms around herself. I know what you must think, that I am without honor. But the marriage was not my choice, and the warrior I was meant to wed is cruel. I have seen how he treats those weaker than himself. I could not bind my life to his, could not bear his children, could not pretend that honor means suffering in silence. Jorin sat down across from her. I don't think you are without honor, he said quietly. I think you are brave. She looked at him sharply, as though searching for mockery, but found none. Her shoulders, which had been rigid with tension, relaxed slightly. You are not what I expected of humans. Most of us are just trying to survive, Jorin said. Same as you. They fell into an easier silence after that. The storm continued its assault on the small homestead, and as the night deepened, it became clear that Kara would not be leaving at dawn as she had promised. No one could travel in this weather. You can sleep by the fire, Jorin said, standing. I have a blanket. He retrieved his only spare blanket, thin and patched but clean, and handed it to her. She accepted it with a nod of thanks. He retreated to his small bedroom, little more than a corner of the house sectioned off with a curtain, and lay down on his narrow bed, fully clothed. Sleep did not come easily. He was acutely aware of the orc woman in his main room, of the danger she represented, but also of the strange rightness of offering her shelter. When he finally drifted off, his dreams were troubled with memories of his brother and the war, mixed with the image of amber eyes and scarred hands clutching a copper kettle. He woke to the smell of cooking. For a moment, disoriented in the gray pre-dawn light, he thought he had imagined the previous night. Then he pushed aside the curtain and saw Kara crouched by the fire, tending something in a small pot. His pot, he realized, which he rarely used anymore since cooking for one seemed like wasted effort. I hope you do not mind, she said without turning. I found some oats and a bit of dried meat. I thought I could repay your kindness with breakfast. Jorin rubbed his face and moved closer. The porridge she was stirring smelled better than anything he had made in months. You don't have to repay me. I want to. She ladled some into his one bowl and handed it to him, then scooped some into the copper kettle for herself. They ate together as pale light began to filter through the windows. The snow was still falling, though not as violently as the night before. The world outside was buried in white, silent and strange. The storm should break by tomorrow, Jorin said. But the roads will be impassable for days after that, Kara nodded, not meeting his eyes. I cannot impose on you that long. Where will you go? He asked, and realized he genuinely wanted to know. South, she said, to the borderlands. I have heard there are places where orcs and humans live in proximity without as much hatred, places where someone like me might disappear and start over. That is weeks of travel on foot, Jorin said, in winter. I know. Her voice was steady, but he could see the fear beneath it. He made a decision that surprised him even as he spoke it. Stay until the worst of the winter passes. I have room, and an extra pair of hands would be useful around the homestead." She stared at him. "You cannot mean that." "I do." He set down his bowl. "Look, I know we are supposed to be enemies. I know there is history and blood between our peoples. But you need help, and I could use the company if I am being honest. The winters here are long and lonely. If anyone finds out you are harboring an orc, my nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and no one comes out here in winter," Jorin said. "We will be careful. You can leave when the roads clear and the weather warms. A few months from now, you will have a much better chance of making it south safely." Kara was silent for a long moment, her strong hands wrapped around the kettle. Finally, she nodded. "I will work for my keep. I will not be a burden." "Agreed," Jorin said, and they shook on it, her hand rough and warm in his. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised them both with its ease. The storm lasted 3 days, and by the time it passed, the snow was piled so high against the house that they had to dig a path to the barn. Kara proved to be a tireless worker. She mucked out the stalls where Jorin kept his 2 goats and aging cow. She repaired the worst of the damage to the barn roof using materials she found in his shed. And she somehow made their meager food supplies stretch further with her knowledge of herbs and preservation. Jorin, for his part, found himself talking more than he had in years. He told her about the homestead, which had belonged to his parents before they died of fever 5 winters past. He told her about his brother, carefully, testing to see if she would recoil from the story of a human soldier. She listened without judgment, and when he finished, she told him about her own losses in the war. A younger sister, barely 15, killed in a raid, an uncle who never came home. "The war took from all of us," she said quietly. "And the chiefs and generals who started it suffered least of all." They learned each other's habits. Kara woke before dawn and preferred to work in silence until she had eaten. Jorin liked to talk through problems aloud, thinking better when he could voice his thoughts. She was meticulous and strong. He was inventive and patient. Together, they accomplished more than either had alone. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Kara opened the copper kettle and carefully removed a folded piece of parchment. Jorin, who had been mending a harness by the fire, looked up as she unfolded it and stared at the writing there. "May I ask what the vows say?" he ventured. She hesitated, then read aloud in a formal cadence that suggested the words were traditional. "I vow to stand beside you in battle and in peace. I vow to bear your children and raise them in strength. I vow to honor your name and your clan above my own. I vow to serve you until death parts us." She folded the parchment again, her expression unreadable. "They are not vows of love, they are vows of duty." "Is that how orc marriages work?" Jorin asked. "Some of them, the arranged ones especially." "Love is considered a luxury, something that might develop over time but is not required." She tucked the parchment back into the kettle. "My mother married for love. It was rare and scandalous. She gave up much to be with my father. When she died, he gave me this kettle and told me to be as brave as she was." Her voice dropped. "I wonder if I have dishonored her memory by running." Jorin set aside the harness. "Your mother gave up things to make her own choice about who to love. You are doing the same." "That seems like honoring her to me." Kara looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. It was a subtle change, a softening around her eyes, a slight curve to her mouth that was almost a smile. "You are a strange human, Jorin Finch." "I will take that as a compliment," he said, and was rewarded with a real smile that transformed her face from stern to radiant. As winter deepened, the temperature dropped until even the inside of the house was perpetually cold. They moved their sleeping arrangements, with Jorin setting up his blankets on one side of the fire and Kara on the other. The shared warmth made the nights bearable, and the arrangement felt natural, companionable. They talked late into those nights, sharing stories of their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. Kara described the beauty of the Orc Highlands in summer, the way the purple heather covered the hills and the cold streams rushed with snowmelt. Jorin told her about the year his brother had taught him to fish, and how they had caught nothing but had laughed until their sides hurt. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changed between them. Jorin found himself noticing the way the firelight caught in Kara's dark hair, the low musical quality of her laugh when something genuinely amused her. He noticed the gentleness with which she handled the baby goat that had been born midwinter, and the careful attention she paid when he spoke, as though his words truly mattered. Kara, for her part, began to see Jorin not as simply a kind human who had offered shelter, but as a man of quiet strength and unexpected wisdom. She noticed the way his hands moved with precision when he worked, the patience he showed when teaching her to read the human script, the sadness that sometimes crossed his face when he thought she was not looking. Neither spoke of these growing feelings. The gulf between their peoples seemed too vast, the situation too temporary. She would leave when spring came. They both knew it. Then came the night that changed everything. Jorin woke to the sound of someone crying. It was soft, muffled, but unmistakable. He sat up and saw Kara huddled on her side of the fire, her shoulders shaking. Without thinking, he crossed to her side and touched her shoulder gently. "Kara, what is wrong?" She turned her face away from him. "Nothing, go back to sleep." "It is not nothing." He sat down beside her, close but not touching. "Talk to me." For a long moment she was silent, and he thought she would refuse. Then the words came out in a rush. "I am afraid. I am so afraid that I made the wrong choice, that I am a coward who ran from duty, that I will never find a place where I belong, that I have thrown away everything for nothing." Her pain was so raw that Jorin felt it like a physical blow. "You are not a coward," he said firmly. "Running from cruelty is not cowardice. Choosing your own path is not cowardice." "Then why do I feel so lost?" She finally turned to look at him, and in the firelight he could see tears tracking down her green cheeks. "I thought I was strong enough to do this alone, but I am not. I am not strong at all. Strength is not about being alone," Jorin said. He reached out and took her hand, the gesture feeling both momentous and entirely natural. "Strength is about knowing when to ask for help, when to accept kindness. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Kara." She looked down at their joined hands, hers so much larger than his, both scarred in different ways. "Why are you so kind to me?" she whispered. Jorin could have deflected, could have made a joke or given a casual answer. Instead, he told the truth. "Because somewhere along the way you stopped being a stranger I offered shelter to. You became my friend, and maybe something more if I am being honest." Kara's breath caught. "Jorin, we cannot." "I know," he said quickly. "I know all the reasons why this is impossible. But that does not change how I feel." She was quiet for a long moment, and he wondered if he had ruined everything with his confession. Then she squeezed his hand. "I feel it too," she said softly. "This pull toward you, this sense that I am more myself with you than I have ever been with anyone. But I do not know what to do with these feelings. I do not know if they are real or just born of circumstance and proximity." "I think they are real," Jorin said. "I think they might be the most real thing I have ever felt." They sat together by the fire, hands joined, until Kara's tears dried and the fear in her eyes receded. When they finally returned to their separate sleeping places, something had fundamentally shifted between them. The feelings that had been unspoken were now acknowledged, hanging in the air like a promise neither knew how to fulfill. The next morning brought a change in the weather. The deep cold broke, and though snow still covered everything, the sun emerged for the first time in weeks. Jorin suggested they take advantage of the improved conditions to check his trap line in the woods beyond the barn. They bundled up and set out, walking through snow that came up to Jorin's knees but only to Kara's shins. She walked ahead of him, breaking trail, and he found himself admiring the easy strength of her movements, the way she seemed to belong in this harsh winter landscape. They checked the traps, finding 2 rabbits and a snow hare, and were heading back when they heard voices. Jorin grabbed Kara's arm, pulling her behind a large pine tree. Through the branches, they could see 3 men on horseback emerging from the tree line to the north. Even at a distance, Jorin recognized them. Marcus Flint and his sons, neighbors from the next valley over. Marcus was known for his hatred of orcs. He had lost his wife in a raid during the war and blamed all orcs for his loss. "We have to get back to the house before they see my tracks," Jorin whispered urgently, but it was too late. One of the sons pointed in their direction, and the 3 riders turned their horses toward them. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run that the horses could not follow faster. Jorin stepped out from behind the tree, placing himself between Kara and the approaching men. "Jorin Finch," Marcus called out as he drew closer. He was a big man with a grizzled beard and cold eyes. "What are you doing out here in this weather?" "Checking my traps," Jorin said, keeping his voice level. "Same as always." Marcus's eyes moved past him to where Kara stood. His expression changed instantly from casual curiosity to shock, then to rage. "You have got an orc with you. You have got a God's damned orc on your property." "She is a traveler who needed shelter during the storm," Jorin said, fighting to keep his voice calm. "I gave her a place to stay." "That is all." "That is all." Marcus dismounted, his hand moving to the long knife at his belt. His sons followed suit, flanking their father. "You are harboring one of them. Do you know what they did, what they took from us?" "The war is over," Jorin said. "And she is not a soldier. She is just a woman trying to survive." "There is no such thing as just an orc," Marcus spat. "They are all killers, all monsters." He looked at Kara with undisguised hatred. "You should die for what your people did." Kara said nothing, but Jorin could feel her tensing behind him, preparing for violence. He spread his arms, trying to appear non-threatening while still blocking access to her. "Marcus, please, do not do something you will regret. Just ride away and forget you saw anything." "Forget." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You are a traitor to your own kind, Finch. When word gets out about this, you will be lucky if they only burn your homestead." "Then do not let word get out," Jorin said. "We are not hurting anyone. We are just trying to survive the winter." "Is that really worth more violence?" For a moment, Marcus seemed to waver, then his older son spoke up. We cannot just let this go. If people find out we knew and said nothing, we will be marked as traitor friends too." Marcus's face hardened. "The boy is right." He drew his knife. "Step aside, Finch. This does not have to involve you." "It does involve me," Jorin said, and he felt a strange calm settle over him. "Because if you want to hurt her, you will have to go through me first." "Jorin, no," Kara said behind him, her voice urgent. "Do not do this. I will go with them. I will not let you be hurt because of me." "You are not going anywhere with them," Jorin said, not taking his eyes off Marcus. The standoff held for several heartbeats. Then Marcus moved, lunging forward with his knife raised. Jorin grabbed the man's wrist, using his momentum against him, and they tumbled into the snow. The sons rushed forward, but Kara was faster. She slammed into the older one with her shoulder, sending him sprawling, and caught the younger one's arm as he swung at her, twisting it until he cried out and dropped his weapon. Marcus and Jorin grappled in the snow, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. Marcus was larger and stronger, but Jorin was younger and more desperate. They rolled, and the knife went skittering away across the frozen ground. Marcus's hands found Jorin's throat and squeezed. Darkness crept into the edges of Jorin's vision. He could hear Kara shouting but could not make out the words. Then suddenly the pressure was gone. Marcus was yanked backward, lifted bodily by Kara, who threw him several feet away into a snowdrift. She stood over Jorin, breathing hard, her tusks bared in a fierce expression. "Enough," she growled. "The next one who moves toward him loses more than his dignity." Marcus climbed out of the snow, his sons moving to flank him again, but they were all eyeing Kara warily now, recognizing the warrior she could be. "This is not over," Marcus said, backing toward his horse. "We will be back." With others, they mounted and rode away, and only when they had disappeared into the trees did Kara drop to her knees beside Jorin. "Are you hurt? Can you breathe?" He coughed and nodded, rubbing his bruised throat. "I am all right, thanks to you." "You should not have done that," she said, and there were tears in her eyes again. "You should not have put yourself in danger for me." "Yes, I should have," Jorin said, sitting up. He took her face in his hands, feeling the smooth coolness of her skin. "Kara, listen to me. I would do it again. I would do it 1,000 times, because I love you." The words hung in the cold air between them. Kara's eyes widened. "Jorin." "I love you," he repeated. "I know it is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons why it is impossible, but it is the truth. I love you, and I will fight anyone who tries to hurt you." Kara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You foolish, wonderful man." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture that felt more intimate than any kiss. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since you first shared your food with me, or maybe since you called me brave, or maybe it has been growing every day since I arrived. But I love you, Jorin Finch." They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together in the snow, acknowledging what both had known but neither had dared to speak. Then Jorin pulled back slightly. "We have to go. Marcus was not making empty threats. He will come back with others, and soon." They hurried back to the homestead, gathered what supplies they could carry, and made preparations to leave. But as the afternoon wore on with no sign of Marcus or anyone else, a different plan began to form in Jorin's mind. "What if we do not run?" he said. Kara looked up from where she was packing dried food into a canvas bag. "What do you mean?" "Marcus thinks we are alone out here, vulnerable. What if we prove we are not? What if we stand our ground and show that we have the right to be here together? Jorin, that is madness. When they come back, they will burn this place to the ground with us in it." "Maybe," he acknowledged. "Or maybe if we show them that we are not afraid, that we are willing to defend ourselves and our home, they will think twice." Fear breeds hatred, but so does the belief that there will be no consequences for violence. Kara crossed to him. "You are talking about fighting, really fighting. Are you prepared to hurt people you have known all your life, to become a pariah to your own community?" "I am prepared to build a life with you," Jorin said. "And that means making a stand somewhere. If not here, where? If not now, when? We could run south, but we would always be running, always looking over our shoulders. I want more than that. I want a home. With you." She studied his face for a long moment. "You are serious about this, completely? Then we will need a better plan than just hoping they think twice." A fierce light came into Kara's eyes. "My people have a saying, the best defense is a wall they cannot imagine climbing. We need to make this homestead so formidable that attacking it seems like a losing proposition." They spent the rest of the day and into the night working. Kara used her knowledge of defensive tactics to help Jorin reinforce the barn doors and shutter the windows with heavy planks. They moved supplies into the house, and made sure they had access to water from the well even if they were trapped inside. Kara found his brother's old weapons in a trunk: a sword, a bow, and a quiver of arrows, and checked them over with a practiced eye. "You know how to use these?" she asked. "The bow, yes. My brother taught me to hunt. The sword, not really. Then you take the bow, and I will take the sword if it comes to that." She hefted the blade, testing its weight and balance. "It is not what I am used to, but it will do." They barely slept that night, taking turns keeping watch. Dawn came gray and cold, and with it came the sound of horses. Many horses. Jorin looked out through a crack in the shutters and felt his stomach drop. At least a dozen men approached the homestead, Marcus at their head. They were armed with torches, pitchforks, axes, and makeshift weapons. Behind them, Jorin could see some of the men looking uncertain, likely dragged along by Marcus's rhetoric but not truly eager for violence. "There is still time to run," Jorin said to Kara. "Out the back, into the woods. You could get away." "I am not leaving you," Kara said firmly. She stood beside him at the window, sword in hand. "We face this together." Marcus's voice boomed across the snow. "Jorin Finch, send out the orc and we will leave your homestead standing. Harbor her any longer and we will burn you out." Jorin took a deep breath and opened the front door, stepping out onto the porch with his bow in hand but not drawn. Kara followed, standing tall beside him, the sword held loosely but ready. The sight of them together, united and unafraid, seemed to give the mob pause. "Go home, Marcus," Jorin called out. "There does not need to be any trouble here." "You are the trouble," Marcus shouted back. "You and that creature. You are a disgrace to your brother's memory, consorting with the enemy." "My brother fought because he was told to," Jorin said, pitching his voice to carry to all the assembled men. "He killed because it was war, but the war is over, and he would not have wanted his death to fuel more hatred. He would have wanted peace. There is no peace with orcs." "Then there is no peace at all," Jorin said, "because I will not give her up. She stays here with me for as long as she chooses. If you want to change that, you will have to kill me first." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the men were shifting uncomfortably, clearly not having expected such a direct confrontation. Jorin pressed his advantage. "Look at yourselves," he said. "You are here to commit murder, to burn a man out of his home for offering shelter to someone in need. Is that who we are now? Is that what the war turned us into? My brother died fighting orcs, yes, but he also died believing he was fighting for something better, for a future where we could live in peace. Are you going to spit on that future because one orc woman dared to seek shelter from a storm?" "She is not just any orc," Marcus snarled. "She is one of them. One of the ones who killed our people, burned our towns." "I was not a warrior," Kara said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. She stepped forward to stand level with Jorin. "I was a healer's apprentice during the war. I mended the injured, yes, but I never raised a blade against humans. I never wanted the war. None of us did. We fought because our chiefs demanded it, the same as you fought because your lords demanded it. We bled and died and lost people we loved, just as you did. And when it was over, we were left with nothing but grief and a future we did not choose." She paused, and Jorin saw some of the men lowering their weapons slightly, listening despite themselves. "I was meant to marry a cruel man to forge an alliance I did not believe in. I ran because I wanted a choice in my own life. Is that really so terrible? Do I deserve to die because I chose freedom?" "You deserve to die because you are an orc," Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Then kill me," Kara said, spreading her arms wide. "Come ahead. Strike me down. But know that Jorin Finch will fight to defend me, and some of you will die in that fight. Is it worth it? Is your hatred worth your lives? Is it worth making widows and orphans?" The silence that followed was profound. The mob, which had seemed so certain of its purpose when it arrived, now looked uncertain. Men glanced at each other, at their weapons, at Marcus, waiting for someone to make the first move. Then, from the back of the group, an older man spoke up. "Maybe the orc has a point, Marcus. I did not ride out here to die. I came because you said there was a threat, but I am not seeing much of one. Just two people trying to live their lives." "Thomas, you cannot be serious," Marcus said. "I am serious. I lost my nephew in the war and it about killed his mother. I am not eager to give her more grief by getting myself killed over this." The older man turned his horse. "I am going home. Anyone with sense will do the same." For a moment it hung in the balance. Then another man turned away, then another. Within minutes, half the mob had dispersed, riding back the way they had come. Marcus was left with only his sons and three other hard-eyed men who looked like they would be happy for violence regardless of the cause. "Cowards," Marcus spat at the retreating backs. Then he turned to Jorin and Kara. "You think you have won, but you have not. I will make sure everyone knows what you are doing here. You will be pariahs. No one will trade with you, help you, or acknowledge you. You will be as outcast as she is." "I can live with that," Jorin said, and he meant it. "As long as I live with her." Marcus stared at them for a long moment, hatred burning in his eyes. Then he wheeled his horse and rode away, his sons and companions following. The homestead was left in silence once more, the only sound the wind moving through the pine trees. Kara lowered the sword and Jorin realized she was shaking. He set down his bow and took her hand. "Are you all right? I cannot believe that worked," she said. "I was certain they would attack." "You were magnificent," Jorin said. "The way you spoke to them, the way you challenged them to see you as a person instead of a monster, that took incredible courage." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but I was not going to let them see it, and I was not going to let them hurt you." They went back inside the house, barring the door behind them. The adrenaline of the confrontation faded slowly, leaving them both exhausted. They sat together by the fire, close enough that their shoulders touched, and for a long time neither spoke. Finally, Kara said, "You were right. About making a stand, about not running. But Marcus was also right about the consequences. You will be cut off from your community now. People will see you as a traitor." "Some will," Jorin agreed, "but others will remember what happened here today. They will remember that we asked them to choose peace over violence, and some of them did. That is something. It is a beginning. A beginning of what? Of something new. A life where it does not matter if you are human or orc, just whether you are kind or cruel, honest or deceitful, good or bad." He turned to look at her. "Kara, I meant what I said out there. I want to build a life with you, here or somewhere else if this place becomes too dangerous. But together, if that is what you want too." Kara was quiet for a moment and Jorin felt fear creep in. Perhaps he had pushed too far, assumed too much. Then she reached into her tunic and pulled out the copper kettle. She held it in her lap, looking down at it. "I carried this kettle all this way because it was my connection to my past, to my mother and the love she had for my father. To the vows I thought I would have to speak." She unfolded the parchment and looked at the formal words written there. "But these are not the vows I want to make." She stood and walked to the fire. Before Jorin could ask what she was doing, she dropped the parchment into the flames. It caught immediately, curling and blackening as it burned. The vows she had been meant to speak to another vanished into ash. "I want to make new vows," Kara said, turning back to Jorin. "I vow to stand beside you, not as a subordinate but as an equal. I vow to share your burdens and your joys. I vow to honor you for who you are, not what clan or race you belong to. I vow to love you, freely given, freely received, for as long as breath is in my body." Jorin stood, his heart hammering in his chest. "I do not have a kettle or a parchment, but I have words." He took her hands in his. I vow to defend you from all who would harm you. I vow to see you as you are, not as others say you should be. I vow to build a home with you where you are safe and loved. I vow to stand with you against the world if necessary, and to love you every day of my life." They stood there, hands joined, having spoken vows more real and binding than any formal ceremony could have provided. Kara leaned down and kissed him, gentle at first, then deeper, and Jorin felt the last of his reservations fall away. This was right. This was real. This was home. When they finally pulled apart, Kara smiled. "So we are married now, by our own words and witnesses of fire and timber." "I suppose we are," Jorin said, smiling back. "Husband and wife against all odds and expectations." "I like the sound of that," Kara said. She picked up the copper kettle, now empty of its former purpose. "And I think this kettle can have a new purpose too. We will use it to make tea and soup and all the ordinary things that make a life together." "I like the sound of that too," Jorin said. The winter continued its slow march toward spring, but the homestead no longer felt like a lonely outpost at the edge of the world. Jorin and Kara fell into the rhythms of married life, learning each other in new and deeper ways. They worked side by side during the day, repairing and improving the homestead. They talked late into the night, planning for a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Marcus did not return, but true to his word, he spread the story of what Jorin had done. Some of the neighboring homesteaders cut off contact, refusing to trade or acknowledge Jorin when they passed him on the rare occasions their paths crossed. But others, like the old man Thomas who had been the first to leave the mob, made a point of treating Jorin and Kara with courtesy when they encountered them. A few even came to the homestead, curious about the woman who had spoken so passionately about peace. One of these visitors was a woman named Helena Frost, a widow who ran a small trading post a day's ride to the east. She arrived one afternoon in early spring, driving a wagon full of supplies. "I heard an interesting story," Helena said without preamble when Jorin opened the door. "About a man who defended an orc woman against a mob. I wanted to see if it was true." "It is true," Jorin said, tensing. He had learned to be wary of visitors. "Good," Helena said, "because if you are brave enough to stand up to Marcus Flint and his bigotry, you are someone I want to know." "May I come in?" Jorin let her in, and Helena proceeded to introduce herself to Kara with the same matter-of-fact directness. "I have never met an orc before," she said, "but I am pleased to make your acquaintance. Any enemy of Marcus Flint is a friend of mine." Helena stayed for dinner, and by the time she left, she had offered to serve as a middleman for trading goods, allowing Jorin and Kara to access supplies without having to deal with the more hostile members of the community. "There are more people than you think who are tired of the old hatreds," she said. "They just need to see that there is another way." As winter gave way to spring, other small signs of change emerged. A young human couple who had settled near the southern border came to visit, asking Kara questions about orc farming techniques, which they had heard were better suited to rocky soil than human methods. An orc trader, passing through on his way south, stopped at the homestead and was shocked to find Kara living openly with a human. He shared news that other mixed communities were forming along the frontier, places where the old divisions were slowly breaking down. "The world is changing," the trader said. "Slowly, but it is changing. What you are doing here, it matters. It gives others hope that they can make different choices too." By the time the first green shoots appeared in the garden plot, Kara had helped Jorin prepare. The homestead had become something of a landmark. Not everyone approved, but everyone knew about the human man and the orc woman who had made a life together against all odds. Some called them fools. Others called them brave. Jorin did not care much either way. He cared about the way Kara laughed when she beat him at the strategy game she had taught him. He cared about the way she fit against him when they slept, her steady breathing a comfort in the darkness. He cared about the future they were building together, one day at a time. One warm evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the newly planted fields, Kara rested her hand on her stomach in a gesture that Jorin had started to notice more and more often. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked. "You have seemed tired lately." Kara smiled, a secret sort of smile that made his heart skip. "I am more than all right. I have been trying to find the right time to tell you. I am with child, Jorin, our child." Jorin felt as though the world had stopped spinning. "A child? Are you certain?" "I am certain. I have missed my bleeding twice now, and I have felt the changes in my body. We are going to have a baby." Joy and terror warred in Jorin's chest. "That is wonderful. That is amazing. But also, what do we do? I know nothing about orc pregnancies. What if something goes wrong? What if Kara put a finger to his lips? We will figure it out, together, the same way we have figured out everything else." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "This child will be both human and orc, a symbol of what is possible when we choose love over hatred. It will not be easy, but it will be worth it." "Yes," Jorin said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, it will be." They sat together as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple, talking about names and preparations and all the changes a child would bring. The copper kettle, which Kara had filled with fresh water, sat beside them, ready to make the tea they would share before bed. It was an ordinary object now, stripped of its ceremonial weight, but somehow more precious for being part of their daily life. The months that followed were full of preparation and adjustment. Kara's pregnancy progressed well, though she found the summer heat more oppressive than she had expected. Jorin fussed over her constantly, until she threatened to tie him up and leave him in the barn if he did not let her continue working. They compromised, with Kara taking on lighter tasks and Jorin doing the heavy labor. Helena became a regular visitor, bringing supplies and news from the wider world. She also brought information about orc midwifery practices, having gone to considerable effort to find and consult with orc healers. "I figured you would need this," she said, handing Kara a thick bundle of notes and instructions. "And I have arranged for a midwife to be here when your time comes." She is half orc herself, if you can believe it, daughter of a human mother and orc father from one of the border communities. She has delivered many mixed babies. Kara took the notes with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Helena. You did not have to do all this." "Yes, I did," Helena said firmly. "You two are family now, and family looks after each other." The baby arrived on a crisp autumn morning, just as the leaves were beginning to turn. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Jorin feared he would lose Kara, but the midwife, a capable woman named Mara, guided them through it with calm expertise. When the baby finally emerged, wailing and perfect, Jorin wept. The child was a girl, with skin a lighter shade of green than her mother's and tiny tusks that were barely visible when she yawned. She had Jorin's brown eyes and Kara's dark hair. She was beautiful and impossible, the living embodiment of everything they had fought for. "What should we name her?" Kara asked, exhausted but smiling as she held their daughter. Jorin thought of his brother, of his mother, of all the people they had lost. He thought of the future they were trying to build. "What about Hope? It feels right." "Hope Finch," Kara said, testing the name. "Yes. It feels right to me too." Hope grew quickly, a healthy and curious baby who seemed fascinated by everything around her. Jorin and Kara took turns caring for her, both amazed and terrified by the responsibility of parenthood. But they learned, as they had learned everything else together. As Hope's first winter approached, word came that Marcus Flint had died. He had taken a bad fall from his horse, and the cold had taken him before anyone could get him to help. Jorin felt a complicated mix of emotions at the news. He had never wanted Marcus dead, but he could not mourn the man who had threatened everything he loved. With Marcus gone, the last of the organized opposition to Jorin and Kara's union faded. Marcus's sons had no interest in continuing their father's crusade. They sold their land and moved east, away from the frontier. Other families who had been hostile gradually became neutral, then cautiously friendly. The transformation was not universal or complete, but it was real. 2 years after Hope was born, another mixed couple settled within a day's ride of the homestead. They had heard the stories of Jorin and Kara and wanted to be part of the community they were building. Then came another, and another. Some were human-orc pairings like Jorin and Kara. Others were simply people who believed that the old divisions no longer served anyone. Helena started calling their loosening collection of homesteads New Haven, and the name stuck. It was not a village, not yet, but it was the beginning of one. A place where what mattered was not the color of your skin or the shape of your ears, but the content of your character. On a warm summer evening, when Hope was 3 years old, Jorin and Kara sat on their porch watching their daughter play in the yard. She was chasing fireflies, laughing with pure joy at each one she managed to catch and release. In the distance, they could see the lights of other homesteads, other families settling in for the night. "You ever regret it?" Jorin asked. "Running away from your arranged marriage?" "All the hardship that followed," Kara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Not for a moment. Everything I have lost I have gained back 100-fold. I have you, I have hope. I have a home where I am not just tolerated but welcomed, where I am loved." "I love you more every day," Jorin said. "Even when you are stubborn and refuse to let me help you." "Especially then," Kara said with a laugh. "And I love you, even when you fuss over me like I am made of glass instead of orc." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter and the emerging stars. The copper kettle sat on the table between them, full of cool water for Hope when she tired of playing. It was scarred now, dented from years of use, but still functional, still precious. "Tell me again about the night I arrived," Hope said later as Kara tucked her into bed. This had become a ritual, a story Hope never tired of hearing. "It was the heaviest snowfall in years," Kara began, her voice taking on the cadence of a much-told tale. "The wind howled and the cold was fierce. I had been walking for days with nothing but my mother's kettle and the vows I was meant to speak to another. I was lost and afraid, ready to give up. But then I saw a light in the darkness, a small homestead that looked like it might offer shelter. And Papa opened the door," Hope prompted. "And your father opened the door," Kara agreed. "Even though he had every reason to turn me away, he let me in. He shared his food and his fire. He gave me kindness when I expected only hatred, and slowly, day by day, that kindness grew into something more. Into love," Hope said, smiling. "Into love," Kara confirmed. "The kind of love that changes everything. The kind of love that builds new worlds. And then I came," Hope said. "And then you came," Kara said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Our greatest adventure yet." Jorin stood in the doorway, listening. When Kara finished the story and Hope had drifted off to sleep, he took his wife's hand and led her back outside. They walked down to the small creek that ran through their property, listening to the sound of water over stones. "I have been thinking," Jorin said, "about expanding. Building a larger barn, maybe a workshop. We could hire some help, teach others the skills we have learned." "That sounds good," Kara said. "I have been thinking too, about starting a school, teaching the children of New Haven to read and write both human and orc languages. So they grow up able to talk to each other, to understand each other." A school, Jorin said, turning the idea over in his mind. That would be something. Knowledge as a bridge between peoples. Exactly. Kara squeezed his hand. We have built a life together. Now let us help build a future for everyone. They returned to the house as the last light faded from the sky. Inside, Jorin banked the fire while Kara checked on Hope one more time. Then they retired to their bedroom, the room they had built onto the house after Hope was born, big enough for a real bed instead of just blankets on the floor. As they lay in the darkness, Kara said quietly, "Do you remember what you said to me? That first night when I broke down and told you I was afraid. I said you were not a coward, that choosing your own path is not cowardice. You also said that strength is about knowing when to ask for help, when to accept kindness. I have thought about those words many times over the years. They changed how I saw myself." She rolled to face him, though in the darkness they could barely see each other. "You gave me permission to be vulnerable, to be uncertain, to be human in the deepest sense of that word. You gave me permission to hope," Jorin said. "To believe that the divisions between our peoples are not permanent, to imagine a world where love matters more than lineage. We gave each other a gift," Kara said. "The gift of being seen, of being valued, of being home." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the sound of their daughter's gentle breathing carrying from the next room. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal lives. But in that small homestead on the frontier, two people who should have been enemies had built something extraordinary. They had built a family, a community, a future. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both subtle and profound. New Haven grew from a scattering of homesteads into a proper village with a meeting hall, a trading post, and the school that Kara had envisioned. Children who were fully human and fully orc and everything in between played together without understanding why such things had once been impossible. The old hatreds did not disappear entirely, but they faded, becoming the province of the bitter and the old rather than the accepted norm. Hope grew into a young woman who carried herself with quiet confidence. She had her mother's strength and her father's kindness, and people said she would do great things. She certainly had no shortage of ambition, talking constantly about traveling beyond New Haven, about seeing both human cities and orc strongholds, about building even more bridges between peoples. "She gets that from you," Jorin told Kara one evening, watching their daughter argue passionately with Helena about trade routes and diplomacy. "She gets it from both of us," Kara corrected. "We taught her to dream big and to believe that change is possible. How could we expect anything less?" On the 10th anniversary of the night Kara had arrived at Jorin's door, they held a celebration. The entire village turned out, bringing food and drink and music. Orc drums provided rhythm while human fiddles provided melody, and the two traditions blended into something entirely new. People danced and laughed and told stories late into the night. At the height of the celebration, Helena called for quiet and raised her glass. "To Jorin and Kara Finch," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "who taught us that love is stronger than hatred, that courage is choosing kindness even when it is dangerous, and that home is not a place, but the people we choose to share our lives with." "To Jorin and Kara," the crowd echoed and drank deeply. Later, when most of the revelers had gone home and only close friends remained, Kara brought out the copper kettle. It was even more battered now, but it still held water, still served its purpose. "This kettle has been with me through everything," Kara said, holding it up so everyone could see. "It carried the vows I was meant to speak to a man I did not love. I carried it through the worst snowstorm in years to a house where I found shelter and kindness. I burned those old vows and spoke new ones, vows of love freely given. And now, this kettle makes tea for my family every morning. It is just an object, copper and simple, but it reminds me that we can take the pieces of our past and give them new meaning. We can transform duty into choice, obligation into love, and fear into hope. She filled the kettle with fresh water and set it to boil over the fire. When the tea was ready, she poured it into cups and passed them around. They drank together, tasting the herbs that Kara had grown in her garden, brewed in the vessel that had traveled so far. To transformation, Jorin said, raising his cup. To new beginnings, added Helena. To love that defies expectation, said Mara, the midwife who had become a dear friend. To family, said Hope, her young voice clear and certain. They drank, and the tea was warm and sweet, carrying with it all the promise of the life they had built together. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Jorin and Kara found themselves alone on their porch once more, the place where they had spent so many evenings over the years. The village spread out before them, peaceful and quiet under the stars. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not knocked on my door that night?" Jorin asked. "Sometimes," Kara admitted. "I like to think I would have survived somehow, found another way, but I know that is wishful thinking. Without your kindness, I would likely have frozen to death in that storm, or been caught by those hunting me, or simply given up." She took his hand. "You saved my life that night, Jorin Finch. Everything that has come after is because you chose to open your door to a stranger." "You saved mine too," Jorin said. "I was so lonely before you came, so trapped in my grief and my memories. You reminded me what it means to live, not just to survive. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to believe in tomorrow." They sat in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined, watching the village they had helped to build. In the distance, a baby cried and was quickly soothed. Somewhere closer, a young couple laughed together. The sounds of life ordinary and precious. "I want to do this forever," Kara said softly. "Sit here with you, watching our community grow, growing old together, seeing what our daughter becomes, building something that lasts." "Then we will," Jorin said. "For as long as we are given, we will do exactly that," and they did. Years turned into decades, and Jorin's hair went gray while Kara's remained dark but shot through with silver at the temples. They saw Hope marry a young man from a human settlement to the east, a scholar who shared her passion for building bridges between cultures. They welcomed grandchildren, some who looked more orc, some who looked more human, all of them loved fiercely. New Haven became a town, then a proper city, known throughout the region as a place where all were welcome regardless of their heritage. Other communities looked to it as an example, and slowly, painfully, the world began to change. The old wounds did not heal completely, but they scabbed over, became scars instead of open, bleeding gashes. Jorin and Kara remained at the heart of it all, not as leaders or politicians, but as living reminders of what was possible. They were simply themselves, an old couple who had chosen love in the face of hatred, kindness in the face of fear, and hope in the face of despair. On a cold autumn morning, as the leaves fell and winter approached once more, Kara woke to find Jorin still asleep beside her. She lay there watching him breathe, counting each rise and fall of his chest, memorizing the lines of his face. They were both old now, their bodies worn by years of hard work and life, but she still saw the young man who had opened his door to a desperate orc woman in a snowstorm. She still felt the same flutter in her chest when he smiled at her. "I love you," she whispered, not wanting to wake him but needing to say the words. His eyes opened, still sharp despite his age. "I love you too," he said. "Every day, from that first night to this morning and all the years beyond." They rose slowly, helping each other as they had learned to do, and made their way to the kitchen. The copper kettle sat in its customary place, so old now that it was more patch than original metal. But it still boiled water, still made their morning tea, still served its purpose. As Kara filled it and set it on the stove, Jorin wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood like that, waiting for the water to boil, content in the simple pleasure of each other's presence. "You have any regrets?" Kara asked, echoing the question he had asked her so many years ago. "Not a single one," Jorin said. "Everything I have done, every choice I have made led me to you, led us to this life. How could I regret that, even the hard parts, the times when people hated us, the struggles and the fear?" "Especially those parts," Jorin said, "because they proved that what we have is real, that it is strong enough to endure. Love that has never been tested is just words, but love that has survived storms and hatred and doubt, that is something worth celebrating." The kettle began to whistle, and Kara took it off the heat. She poured the tea with practiced ease, and they carried their cups to the porch, wrapped in heavy blankets against the autumn chill. The town spread out before them, busy with morning activity. Children ran to school, vendors set up their stalls, neighbors called greetings to each other. "We helped make this," Kara said, gesturing to the scene before them. "This place where our daughter and our grandchildren can live without fear, where being different is not a crime, where love is possible." "We did," Jorin agreed. "Along with Helena and Mara and Thomas and all the others who believed. It was never just us, even though it started with us." "No, but we were the first. We proved it could be done." Kara sipped her tea. "Do you think it will last?" "After we are gone, I think it has a better chance than when we started," Jorin said. "We planted seeds. Others have watered them, helped them grow. The roots go deep now. It will take more than one generation of hate to tear them out." They sat together as the sun rose higher, warming the day despite the autumn cold. At some point, Hope arrived with their youngest grandchild, a boy of 5 who ran straight to them, shouting with joy. They embraced him, laughing at his exuberance, and listened to his excited stories about nothing in particular. Hope watched them with soft eyes. "You two still make it look easy," she said, "after all these years." "It is not easy," Kara said. "Love is never easy, but it is worth the effort. Every single day." "Will you teach him that?" Hope asked, nodding toward her son. "The way you taught me. We will teach him everything we know," Jorin said. "About kindness and courage and the power of opening your door to a stranger in need. About speaking vows that come from the heart instead of obligation," Kara added. "About making tea in an old kettle and finding joy in simple things," Jorin finished. They spent the day together, 3 generations bound by love and choice rather than simply by blood. When evening came and Hope took her son home, Jorin and Kara returned to their porch one last time. "Thank you," Kara said suddenly. "For what?" "For everything. For opening your door, for seeing me as a person instead of a monster, for loving me even when it was dangerous and difficult, for building this life with me, for every day we have shared." She took his hand. "For choosing me." "Thank you for knocking on my door," Jorin said, "for being brave enough to ask for help, for teaching me what real strength looks like. For the family we have built and the community we have helped to create, for every day we have shared." He brought her hand to his lips. "For choosing me back." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one until the sky was full of light. The copper kettle sat on the table between them, empty now but still precious. A symbol of journeys taken and vows spoken, of old meanings transformed into new purposes, of love that had survived every test. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the hour. In the town below, lights appeared in windows as families settled in for the night. The world continued its eternal cycle, indifferent to individual lives, but within that vast indifference, Jorin and Kara had carved out something meaningful. They had created a space where love was possible, where differences could be celebrated, where the future was brighter than the past. And in that moment, sitting together on their porch with the copper kettle between them and decades of shared life behind them, they were completely, perfectly content. They had arrived in different ways from different worlds, but they had found each other, and that made all the difference. Years would continue to pass. They would grow older still, would eventually leave this world as all things must, but the legacy they built would endure. In the children who played together without seeing difference, in the couples who loved across old divides, in the community that had learned to value compassion over hatred, hope over despair, and love over fear. The orc bride had arrived in the heaviest snowfall in years, carrying only a kettle and her vows. She had found a man who chose kindness over caution, love over tradition, and hope over fear. Together, they had built not just a life but a future. And that future would outlive them both, carrying forward the simple truth they had proven with their lives. That love, real love, is always worth fighting for. That home is not where you start, but where you choose to stay. And that sometimes, the best answer to a stranger's knock is simply to open the door and say welcome.